In the world of music, rap, clothing, or really any other creative venture, there's often the person who creates the sound, wave, and idea, and then the one who makes it popular. And in most cases, unfortunately, the person who creates the sound isn't always the one that gets the acclaim and support for it. Now, I'm not saying that King invented trap metal or anything like that, but he's definitely an OG in the field who deserves more attention for the contributions he made to the genre. Because just like Drown Millie, he's somebody who's okay with fading into the background if it means his friends are going to shine brighter, and he's able to cultivate their talent, take their raw energy, and then turn it into exactly what it needs to be to make it to the mainstream, or at least get bigger than it already was. And the reason behind that is probably because King never really had a lot of people in his life to cultivate his talent when he was younger, so he now helps others reach their full potential. Sadly though, this kindness is not always reciprocated, and oftentimes the kindest people are always the ones that are used the most. And you will soon see exactly what I mean when we look into the story of King. Now before we get into it, I do want to shout out our sponsor, Hell's Dread Productions. Now I've been a little bit wary about sponsoring any products on this channel because I don't want to advertise something that I don't think my base would like, but I truly do believe that this clothing brand fits very closely to the style that I want to go with this channel. They have a lot of cool designs. They got anime, they got some gore stuff, they got some band type tees. It's just a couple guys running a small time operation, but despite that, it's very professional. So if you have any problems, you can get in contact with them very easily. And if you want to check it out, the links will be in the description below. So go check them out, show them some love. And without further ado, let's get into the story of King. Andy Rodriguez was born November 1st, 1991 in Philadelphia. He was one of 3 siblings, being the only boy in the family, and growing up was not easy for him. His father wasn't really in the picture for most of his life, leaving him with a lack of guidance, and his mother was very emotionally abusive. Growing up, he never recalls anyone saying that they loved him or even being hugged by any family members. All these factors combined led him to be a very emotionally distant child, immersing himself in the world of anime and Yu-Gi-Oh! To try to escape his terrible environment. It wasn't all bad for Andy though, because he did have one family member who would watch over him, his grandmother, who would say that he would grow up to become a king when he was older, giving him the nickname King that would later become his rap name. Now, his school days weren't very notable because just like most troubled youth, he was smart but not very interested in actually being there. Eventually, King's lack of guidance in life led him to the Gangster Disciples, who became his second family. A lot of people have a negative position on gangs, but King says joining up with the Gangster Disciples was an overall positive. Without his father in his life and not a lot of guidance from his family, he felt like he was spinning out of control with nowhere to be and nothing to do. But once he joined up with them, they give him guidance and purpose, as well as teaching him how to carry himself correctly. You see, in these underprivileged neighborhoods, especially back in the 90s and early 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot of chances for smart kids like King to make it out. There's no structure, anyone to cultivate his imagination, or any programs in school to help him get into a brighter future. But once the GD stepped in, things got a lot better for him. Unfortunately, there was still negative aspects to it because he was no longer able to indulge in anime or Yu-Gi-Oh! For fear of being ostracized from the gang. But you'll see this as a trend throughout King's life. There's a lot of positive and a lot of negative all at the same time. King was able to hold it together and graduate high school, even getting into college for psychology, but once he arrived there, he felt like he wasn't doing the right thing with his life, so he dropped out to pursue a more creative venture. See, another constant in King's life growing up was music. At first it was just rap music, hearing it around his local area, but eventually he found rock that led him to heavy metal. And once he heard that genre, it planted the seeds in his head to start creating his own sound, but at the time, he was still a little bit too nervous to actually start rapping. He even describes the feeling of listening to rock and metal music as being on the back of a horse with a sword in hand about to fight an army. So by the time that 2015 rolled around and a whole new wave of music was coming into the scene, King was ready to start dropping his own stuff. He dropped his first track on SoundCloud called Slum Kings, but unfortunately some of his early music is actually no longer present on there, so we have to look back to his first available track, Asylum. Now in this song you can start to hear the more aggressive vocals coming from King, but it isn't the full-on trap metal sound that you're probably more familiar with. It wasn't long before he dropped the track You Die We Ball, and this one you can really start to hear King come into his own, really harnessing that trap metal sound. His first big hit on the platform was Slaughter Pit. This track got him enough attention in the scene to start getting noticed around the entire country, and not long after that, he got on a Brock Steezy track called Want 'Em Dead with Zillakami and Flocko. If you've watched this channel in the past, you definitely already know who Zillakami is, but you may not know Flocko. I actually did a whole video on him if you want to check it out, but most of you would probably know him as a member of Spider Gang. But before he was a big rapper in any capacity, back when he only had 400 plays, King was able to discover him and start reposting his music. You see, King's social media presence also played a pretty big part in his rise to the top. A lot of people were very intrigued intrigued by a crazy looking character like him being very grounded and speaking his stories about the street life. Unfortunately, we can't look back at any of that because it was all deleted after a couple events that would transpire in the future. Despite that, all of these factors combined would lead him to get 100,000 followers on SoundCloud as well as 300,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. And with this newfound audience, he would often try to put on lesser known artists like Flocko and another artist you may have heard of named Kxng. He was able to discover Kxng when he only had about 100 plays on Spotify, and then he would repost his music and get him more success. And with this newfound success, he would try to form a collective with Flocko, Kxng, and another artist known as Leprosy, which if you don't know who that is, you soon will. Unfortunately though, it wasn't long before it fell apart because they were all busy with their own careers, but King would continue to do music with Kxng and help him out with his art. King would never slow down, dropping tracks like Neon Oddity and Toxic, but even with his influence and numbers growing, he couldn't help shake the feeling that he was still empty inside. And he would try to fill that hole with heavy drinking, leading him into the darkest part of his life where he would even get into a physical altercation with his then girlfriend. And eventually all of this led him to rock bottom, where he'd sit down on his bed, get his gun, put it in his mouth, and think about ending it all. But before he did, he actually got a message from an artist known as Young Rare. This guy was a big fan of King, and he would go on and on about how much he wanted to work with him and make music. At first, King was kind of put off by the kid, thinking he had a corny persona and a bit of a weird energy around him, but after listening to a couple of his songs, he realized he actually had some pretty good lyrical ability. And with nothing else to lose, he decided to join the collective Death Rising and start making music with Young Rare. At first, the two's partnership seemed like a match made in heaven. Rare was able to bring the attention to the group, and then King was able to back it up with his muscle and gang affiliations. He really added some credence to what Rare was saying in his songs, but after a while, King would start to notice that Rare was taking his real life stories and writing them into his raps. This did bother King, but he tried to not let it get to him, because after all, Rare was an artist and he knew that the whole stick was working for them because Death Rising was becoming more popular by the day. He started dropping tracks together like Buck 50 featuring Killswitch and 3-Man Cell, eventually even moving in together. In the time that King lived with Rare, he started to notice some pretty weird behavior coming from him. He always had suspiciously young looking girls around. At first, King didn't really think much of it, but after leaving a bar one night, they were confronted by a couple local gangsters who began to call Rare a chomo. Things could have got really bad because King didn't have a gun on him at the time, but he was able to de-escalate the situation and ask Rare what was going on. Rare would tell King that he was arrested in the past, but it had nothing to do with children and it was actually for gun charges. Because just like always, Rare was able to weasel himself out of the situation and convince King that he was actually a good guy, but everything came to a head on the Blood and Bones tour. This tour was meant to be a big deal for Death Rising, inviting many prominent members of the underground to come headline. Alongside King and Rare came another artist named Akari who was part of Death Rising, as well as another unrelated artist named Winterheart Cold, and King even brought Killswitch out. The tour was set to have 6 sold out shows, but once they actually showed up to the venues, they realized that it was a complete ghost town, and even worse than that, a lot of the members of the tour weren't getting paid what they were supposed to. The one bright side of this tour is that King and Winter ended up bonding and becoming close friends, but on the flip side, Rare and his weird friend Akari continued to bring underage girls around the hotel room. Another notable moment of this tour is when Killswitch would take some Molly and ended up having an anxiety attack, so King had to bring him to the hospital. You would think that'd be the absolute worst that the tour would get, but one night after a particularly bad show, King would walk in on Akari in bed with an underage girl, and when he saw this, he completely lost it, beating Akari up so bad that he looked like a smushed up tomato and even hitting him in the face with a pistol as well. As soon as Rare saw this, he decided to call the cops and get King arrested for aggravated assault. On top of that, since he had a gun on him at the time, he also got aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And if that wasn't bad enough, once he got to jail, he was also hit with another charge for the altercation that he had with his girlfriend, and because of that, he was denied bail. Because of all that, he actually got sentenced to 4 years in prison, and even worse, while he was locked up, Killswitch actually ended up sleeping with his girlfriend. So what happened to Rare and Akari, I hear you ask? Nothing ever happened to them for fooling around with underage girls, and even worse than that, they completely destroyed King's whole reputation. For the 4 years that King sat in prison, everybody thought that he was a terrible guy who hit his girlfriend and was a complete nutjob who tried to take young Rare down with him. And that was all because Rare and his family were completely able to cover up the entire altercation. So what happened to King during his time in prison? Well, actually, his dad stepped back into the picture and started taking care of him for the first time in his life. He also became quite spiritual and started to look inward. He was able to shake off all the anger and helplessness that he felt throughout most of his life and became a much better person. So all of that went down in 2019, but now it's 2023 and King is actually free for the first time in 4 years, and not a lot of people know that. Since being free, King has had a battle with censorship with those who don't want his story told. He actually ended up doing an interview speaking on the whole Young Rare situation and his incarceration, but it had to be taken down because Rare put his legal team on him. Now you see, the sticky situation that King finds himself in right now is that Rare is actually one of the witnesses in his whole assault charge, so if he tries to say anything about Rare, it's seen as witness tampering. Because of that fact, Rare's actually managed to get King's Instagram page taken down a couple times, as well as the interview being taken offline as well. He's made a very active effort to get King taken offline so he can't say anything about his situation and try to clear his name in any way. But luckily, this isn't King saying this is me saying this, so if Rare wants this video taken down, what what he can do is actually hop on an interview with me, talk about it like a man, say his side of the story, and stop trying to take things down behind the scenes. But hey, fuck it. Big shout out to Rare's mom for commenting on my last video and trying to clear her son's name, but he's a big boy, I'm sure he can speak for himself, and a big shout out to Kxng as well. He's a really cool guy who's very open about his past and is trying to make a conscious effort to change his ways and be a better person. And he's got some songs dropping soon with Winter Heart Cold, so if you want to check those out and be part of the comeback, that'd be really cool as well. And with that said, shout out Knife Gang, leave a knife emoji in the comments below if you made it to the end of this video so I know that you did. Subscribe to the channel, I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. I got an Instagram page, I got a Discord server, the links to that will be in the bio too. And finally, I have a second channel where I do interviews and repost music, so if you want to be part of that, hit me there too. And with all that said, bye. Hope to see you soon, Rare.